Now, we debate energy endlessly on this programme. We have ever since we launched. But there's always a new story. There's always a new scandal. And there's another one today. Well, I'm very pleased that Ross Clark, energy journalist who writes in The Sun and The Mail and The Telegraph and goodness knows where else, and Ross, a friend of the programme. It'll be a shock to a lot of people. They've seen this report that has come out from Citizens Advice that a stunning 3.2 million people with prepayment meters have been left with cold and dark homes at some point in the last year. Explain to us how these prepayment meters work and how they're installed.
Well, these are meters where you have to, as it sounds, you have to pay for your electricity up front rather than use the electricity and then pay for it in a bill.
And is that because you're a bad credit risk?
Well, you can probably choose to have one if you want to, but it's most cases it's because people have fell behind with their bills, and the energy companies have forced them to have a prepayment meter. And there were 370,000 households last year where prepayment meters were not just forced on them, but forced on them by court warrant. And, the energy companies...
Let's just pause on that a minute,
yes, yeah,
and let it sink in for the listeners and the viewers. Say 370,000 homes in this country where there was a warrant.
Yeah, so, energy company arrives at the door with warrant to enter your property, come in and forcibly remove your meter and force you onto prepayment in future. But what's really worrying about this is because the consequences of being switched onto a prepayment meter, I mean, it's, having your house basically broken into by the energy company is bad enough. But what happens then is you'll pay a higher price for your electricity than if you're on, direct debit and that sort of thing.
You'll pay a higher price?
You'll pay a higher unit price for your electricity.
So those that are the poorest in society...
Yeah, who've fallen into debt because they can't afford their energy bills, they end up paying a little bit more for their...
Ross, why is nobody across the road in this building behind us in Parliament why is no one screaming about this?
I find it absolutely weird, the response of Parliament, government and opposition to the whole energy business of the past year, because, bills have gone through the roof. But, what have they done? They've said given £400 to every single household in the country, to people, billionaires, millionaires who do not need this money. They've given us all £400 each to help with our bills, capped all our bills, people who don't need it. And at the same time, these people who really cannot afford their bills, they've fallen through the net. And if you're on a prepayment meter, you have to buy vouchers from the shops. It's very hard. It's much harder to get that £400, bung from the government to help from your bills. So those are the people who are really being left out.
I'm also looking, Ross, at what we pay before we came on air. Basically, we pay 50% more for electricity than if we were in France or Germany. We pay double for our electricity if we were living in Australia, and we're more expensive than America. And I know we've done this before on this programme, but it bears repetition. Why is electricity in this country more expensive, so much more expensive than our neighbours? Yeah,
well, we've got a very perverse energy market. At the moment, we switched to renewables of about 40% wind and solar, about 40% gas. And, the different mixtures. Some days in December there was 2% wind and a lot of gas. Now wind is producing 50% and gas very little. But the way the market works is that the price paid to all the producers of electricity is fixed by the highest, the price commanded by the highest cost producer. And what happens is, wind drops away and we need extra power to go in the grid. So, the market goes out then to a gas producer who, has to charge a very high price because they're only producing electricity for a very short period of time, and the per unit cost of that producing electricity for a very short time is very high. And if that's sort of 200 pence a kilowatt hour, and the wind normally might cost 50 pence per kilowatt hour. Suddenly the wind company is also receiving 200 pence per hour.
Who invented all this?
Well, this was invented when the energy market was, the energy industry, electricity industry was privatised back in the 80s, and they had to sort of invent this sort of rather bogus market because, of course, we're all getting the same electricity. You're getting the same electrons, whoever your provider is or wherever it's coming from. So they had to invent this sort of bogus market, which, in normal times might
So basically,
work,
we're paying more for our electricity than any other consumers in any other part of the Western world. Not just consumers, but our businesses too, many of whom close because of high energy costs. And with prepayment meters, the poorest in society are now expected to pay even more. I find the whole thing a complete scandal.